Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister is running a government where in almost every case, you cannot put your finger on what's happening with the agreements, the tendering process. And if he continues like this, Mr. Speaker, this opens the way for blatant corruption. And there is a cost to corruption, Mr. Speaker. That kind of leadership, Mr. Speaker, continues to encourage a system of graft if it continues. And that kind of system goes deep. Mr. Speaker, the airport project has been spoken about. And while members opposite, Mr. Speaker, claim all the time that we are talking about things that have been debated, it's just a tactic to stop us. It means, therefore, that in future debates of the House, we should not talk about the budget. It means, therefore, we should not talk about so many things. And the ruling has been made, and I look forward to debates of members opposite to see if they'll talk about things that we have debated in this House. I look forward eagerly to that. In the airport project, Mr. Speaker, you have a Prime Minister who came to Parliament, and is he allowed, Mr. Speaker, to put earphones in his ears? Do you see, Mr. Speaker, do you see the Prime Minister with headphones in his ears? Is that allowed? That's his disdain for the people. That is his disdain for the people. His disdain for the people. Disrespectful. Mr. Speaker, the $270 million that was loaned from the Taiwanese was loaned, and up to now the government cannot give us the details. They cannot tell us. They cannot tell us how much more we'll need to complete the airport. It's like, Mr. Speaker, a contractor tells you you need $100,000, go for a loan for $100,000 to build your house. But he tells you that you'll need more money to build a house. He doesn't have the plan. You don't have designs. You will get the designs after you get the loan. And in time, we are going to complete the project. C'est même comme si un contracteur doit prendre un loan pour $100 000 pour faire un caille. Il n'a pas ni plan, il n'a pas ni design, mais ils savent qu'ils ont $100 000, pas qu'il finit caille là. Et qu'ils doivent jouer plus l'argent plus tard. That is how this Prime Minister operates. Mr. Speaker, the same thing happened with St. Jude's. And even though, Mr. Speaker, he put lead or iron plugs in his ears, the people of St. Lucia don't need to hear. They feel the effects of this Prime Minister's leadership in this country. And so, Mr. Speaker, tonight, he puts plugs in his ears, but the children who inhaled, according to doctors, fiberglass fibers from the St. Jude hospital roof, and the doctors, according to them, for years, those fibers may be lodged in their lungs. He's putting plugs in his ears because he will not hear their cries for many years to come. Mr. Speaker, the St. Jude Hospital project, when the containers, the used containers, when the used containers were being put for the doctors and for people to be put in those containers in St. Jude, he will continue to put plugs in his ears in the House because he does not care. Because if, Mr. Speaker, something happens to him, it's helicopters that take him and his family and his people to Martinique and other places.
Member, Vieux-Fort North,
member from Vieux-Fort North continues to go on. We're being very patient with him.
You didn't hear, you had plugs in your ears.
And that he has said that there was fiberglass in the stadium. I want him to again know that he's misleading the House. The reports that came out show that there was no fiberglass and the elements that were in the roof, and I would ask him to desist from that. In fact, there was a news story that came out, and I'm surprised that he did not hear it.
Honourable Member Vieux-Fort North, the point of order, Honourable Member Vieux-Fort North, relates to you stating that there was a report or medical issue with reference to fiberglass. The Prime Minister is now indicating that there was a report which came out to indicate there was no fiberglass. So I would ask that you, Honourable Member, be so note or take note that we are not, and though I know the member for Castro South has indicated if something is not correct, then it is for the government minister or members of government to so indicate. But we cannot be allowed to say anything we so wish and just simply say that the ministers will so produce evidence to the contrary. So, Honourable Member, I am asking you to take note of that and to proceed cautiously and not in any way make allegations or make statements that we cannot prove.
Mr. Speaker, the issue of fiberglass I will take back when I have the appropriate documents. I will submit. But I will continue, Mr. Speaker. It's very instructive that again this Prime Minister will stand up and try to argue about this matter when doctors and many people fell ill when the roof was being removed. It shows the callousness of this Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I understand why he behaves like that. Because he pas mêlé. C'est pas Ishli ek famille qui est à l'hôpital là, qui était à l'hôpital là, Mr. Speaker. Là, yo te ka tirer, roof like docteur, moun te malade, et tout la peau yo te ka bon soleil. It's not his family or his children, Mr. Speaker. We are talking about people's health. We are talking about people who are sick. And every single member in this honorable house will laugh at this. Every single one is guilty of, by association, Mr. Speaker. How can you tell me that this matter, where the roof of the stadium was removed without the proper amenities to remove them, people went to hospital, people went to the emergency room, and Mr. Speaker, they are taking this for Papi Show. But Mr. Speaker, let's leave it at that. The containers, the bed sheets, Mr. Speaker, the member from Micoud North, when in opposition, I remember, went to St. Jude's at the stadium, and I remember the photos about the beds at St. Jude. Mr. Speaker, if you go to St. Jude now, the bed sheets, and they can find $20 million, $13 million to allocate to a road in the DSH area. So, Mr. Speaker, laissez pas yo qui en dedans, et laissez pas famille yo. It's okay. Parce que laissez yo, laissez l'autre moun, Jean Belleville, avec Jean Pierrot, avec Jean Gouas, avec Jean Denry, avec ces places là, pas ça jouer un hélicoptère one time pour mener yo Martinique. But they are going to stand in this house. He is going to stand in this house and try to argue about it wasn't fiberglass, it wasn't this. Mr. Speaker, what he thinks of us, is very important. The issue of minibus drivers, Mr. Speaker, and the taxes. The typical minibus driver who travels from Vieux-Fort to Belleville or from Vieux-Fort to Grace, Mr. Speaker, with a van taking about 15 gallons of gas, pays about $3,200 extra in gas taxes a year. And depending on how often they move, we have calculated it to up to $4,000 in gas taxes a year for the minibus drivers, at least in my area. Papa Lepu, c'est chaque cale Castuya. I don't know for the Gros Islet, I have not calculated for Gros Islet. It's easy to calculate, but this Prime Minister does not care about that, because he can quickly take an FAR to put on the government van, and I thought to get an FAR you had to go through a process, and you needed to have a farm, and you needed to go through forms and documents in the Ministry of Agriculture. But because he's a Premier Minister, he need to make FAR on the van now. FAR is there for a particular reason. It's an incentive for farmers. FAR. So he's a king, Mr. Speaker. He said, he can control tout bagay. I would love to see the documents that cause the Prime Minister to get FAR to put on his van. That is the kind of attitude I'm talking about. A king of all his surveys, because pay bush dodlers, or say mendicants, or say jackass, and I'm doing what I want. Mr. Speaker, I do not have confidence because this Prime Minister, based on his utterances and based on his actions, he does not believe that we deserve the Owen King EU Hospital. Based on his actions and his utterances, Owen King EU Hospital are trop bon pour nous. So this is not about economics. It's not about, it's too good for us. We cannot run it. And therefore it has to go to somebody else to run. The doctors are not important. The nurses are not important enough to bring them into the fold of discussion. Mr. Speaker, the case of healthcare in St. Lucia is tragic. And while we always had issues with healthcare, the deliberate actions of this Prime Minister, who leads his cabinet, have caused healthcare and many situations in healthcare to worsen. Mr. Speaker, when I read the pledge and I read our national anthem, I sing the national anthem, I ask myself sometimes whether the Prime Minister is really and truly St. Lucian. While he may have St. Lucian nationality, is he really, does he understand us? Does he understand what makes us tick? Does he understand us? Does he understand us, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, in the treatment of St. Lucians, by promoting friends, foreigners, and family, his attitude is wepuku. Wepukuzot. We don't belong. Wepukuzot. So, Mr. Speaker, we are left to wander in a valley of despair while the Prime Minister surveys all of what he sees. We do not belong. It is not for us. Mr. Speaker, a Prime Minister cannot have the confidence when in our 40th year of independence, you can actually pick out a list of at least 40 untruths. There are more, but I picked out 40. How much time do I have left, Mr. Speaker?
Honorable Member, you end at 7:54. This clock.
Mr. Speaker, how can we have confidence in a Prime Minister when you can pick out over 40 untruths? And it's important. It's very important, Mr. Speaker, to the Prime Ministership of a country. It's very important. So, Mr. Speaker, you cannot just simply say what you want and believe that no one is listening. And I have listed over 40 untruths. You don't want me to say lies in the House, Mr. Speaker. You've said so to me before. 40, at least 40 untruths that can be proven. And every simple untruth, there is evidence, whether it is from his Facebook page, whether it is the notes of press conferences. The Prime Minister is just a stranger to the truth at every turn. Visas to America. The goal is to make sure that one day, the day will come when St. Lucians will not need visas to go to America. The whole Tuxedo Villas case. The removal of VAT, we are still waiting. He spoke about gas prices in Grenada. That was proven not to be true. He also said, Mr. Speaker, about the deportees that the member for Castries South spoke about. That's proven not to be true. Mr. Speaker, on September 19th, the incident with the journalists, he said something that was not true. Because on the 29th of September in New York on 2016, he said something else. The 4,000 case backlog. We have an over 4,000 case backlog. The Chief Justice, at the opening of the law year in that year, said it's only 1,000 criminal cases pending. That proved to be an untruth. The gas prices will decrease. That proved to be an untruth. He's going to make St. Lucia safer. That Kenny can't, but I will. That continues to prove to be delusional. The DSH public the DSH document being made public on 7th of December 2016, when the moderator asked him, and then on December 8th on 2016 on talk, that proved to be an untruth. The whole thing about the framework agreement, and then when he spoke to Dave Samuels on the Third World Show, that proved to be an untruth. The unemployment rate for 2015 has gone up over 2014. The HTS report of May 2016 proved that to be an untruth. Tent rental of $850 US. The Sandy Beach will remain a national park. Phase 2 of the DSH renderings actually showed high-rise buildings on the beach. Dialysis machines at VH. He never met Tio Aking, and the member for Castries South said, the first phase of DSH will be funded by Tio's own money. Later he said that we have to return the money. The causeway to Murray Islands, February 13th in Parliament 2018. Taiwanese funds for road. The Ching Ching Bluff. Instead they are taking out, not Ching Ching, but a lot of dollars from the pockets of St. Lucians. The Border Control Authority, August 2018. About foreign direct investment, November 26, 2017 on Rick Wayne's show. November 20th, 2018, outside Parliament. The 43%, which the member for Castries South spoke about, and he came back and said he deliberately allowed it to go. The whole thing about building how many hotels in his budget speech. Back in Dogg's comments. He never made any derogatory remarks about teachers, that he loved teachers. And then, on December 12th, the evidence says differently. Constitutional reform. The jackass comment in his New Year's address, he spoke about He inherited the fastest debt accumulation in 5 years. And so many others. The 200% increase in bananas. And so many more, Mr. Speaker. I've accumulated just 40 to mark our 40th anniversary of independence. 40 untruths. And I have so many more. Our catalog, I think the last time I checked, it was 89, and there was one this week again. So that's 90. Untruths. How can you have confidence in a prime minister who speaks so many untruths? And as I've said before, you can make mistakes, but you come back and say that I made a mistake, I erred. And so, Mr. Speaker, I tell you that this prime minister is a shepherd leading a country to death. This man, Mr. Speaker, is not a good shepherd. And St. Lucia is left wanting. This man makes St. Lucians lie down before the friends, foreigners, and family. This man replenishes his stores. He leads working St. Lucians to the door of further indebtedness. And all this for his close associates' sake. Through our constituents, St. Lucians walk through valleys of debt and personal darkness. This man shows that he feels no empathy, for he believes that his lords, his friends, will deliver him. And so, Mr. Speaker, I say to you that there are so many reasons for us having no confidence in this prime minister. But what I want, more than anything else in this debate, is for the member for Castries North to stand up and say that the prime minister is correct about what he's doing. He supports the prime minister in what he's doing. The member for Miku North, I want her to say, yes, I support everything the prime minister is doing, and he's right. The member for Babuno and the member for Castries Central. But in fact, I know where the member for Castries Central stands already, because Idubute Katra Idubutnu. The member for Castries Southeast, I know is his chief, and I know where he stands, his chief minister, his chief commandant. But I want him to place on the record in the House so that his constituents can hear that everything the prime minister is doing with healthcare, privatizing Owen King EU Hospital, is correct. As for the member, through you, Mr. Speaker, for Choiseul, the member for Choiseul said that he's not a politician. But today, he also stood up, Mr. Speaker, to try to stop us. I want him to tell the fishers in Choiseul, Mr. Speaker, that the extra gas tax that the prime minister has placed on them is good, and he's right. I want him to go to Choiseul like Dise Pesheasa. I want him to stand up and say that. I say that, Mr. Speaker, because they, the member for Soufrière, go and tell the fishers that the prime minister is correct. All of the people who are working with the principals, go and tell the schools and the school principals that we were correct, you are correct not to rehire them, and that you are correct not to rehire those people, those many people who are caring for our elderly, and that you only hired some. Every single one of you, member for Grosile, member for Ansawe Canaries, member for Denry South, Mr. Speaker, as I end, I call every single one of them to take your place today and stand up and tell your constituents that this prime minister is doing everything that's correct. Because sometimes I hear in the media, and I hear in the public, Mr. Speaker, as an aside, a while ago the member for Castries South said he's warning me. I don't know what that meant, whether it was in jest or whatever, but I just want to say it. I just want to say it, and I know why I'm doing that. Yeah, I know you'll not waste my, I know I'm not of the kind of ilk for you to waste your time with me.
Honorable members.
But, Mr. Speaker, I wish to say.
Go ahead, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, it's important to me to pause to allow the mics to pick up what the Mayor for Castries office
But at the
says.
same time, your time is running out. and
Yeah,
I
the
will soon
record,
have to call.
the record is very important to me. So, Mr. Speaker, I say to you that I support the leader of the opposition in this historic debate, in this historic motion. And I say to members opposite, let your conscience speak to you. Let your conscience speak to you. And instead of threatening us, instead of trying to prevent this motion, you all have tried all kinds of things in the book, even writing now a motion against the leader of the opposition. Everything they're trying in the book. But the people of St. Lucia will decide. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I support the leader of the opposition's motion that we have no confidence in the leadership of Prime Minister Alan Chasney. Thank you.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, I pick up the light of the member for Miko North, and I see your light at the same time. Honorable Member, I'll come to you, Honorable Leader, but...
You're allowed to vote, you're allowed to close it.
Honorable members, Leader, Honorable Member, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I move on the stand order 38-1 that the question be now put.
Honorable members, the question before the House is that the question be now put. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. Honorable member for Swazell, your light is on.
Yes, I'm just ready to speak. Can I make my contribution to the debate?
No, the question has not, the motion for the question to be put. The motion for the question to be put, according to the indication of members, is that the question for the motion for the question to be put would have failed because in my mind or my hearing, the noes were greater than the yes. So as far as from my ruling, the debate continues. Honorable member for Swazell. Honorable member for Swazell.
Can I get the? No, I need it. From my phone, I speak.
But I don't understand them because all speakers must not speak. I really don't understand that.
Mr. Speaker, as I rise to make my contribution to this debate, I beg your permission to first quote a line from a play riddle by William Shakespeare. It's from a play called As You Like It, Act 2, Scene 7. And it goes, "This world is a stage and all the men and women merely players." And Mr. Speaker, what transpired in this House today reminded me so much of these lines. Mr. Speaker, this motion that has been laid in the House today is riddled with subjectivity, personal feelings, untruths. Mr. Speaker, have you ever heard of the saying, "Na bwile on kai pou tue an fomi"? Mr. Speaker, I'll interpret. The opposition, for the sake of the self-inflicted hate on the Prime Minister Alan Chastanet, is ready to burn St. Lucia.
That's right.
I say self-inflicted hate, Mr. Speaker, because this thing has gone on for long before the Prime Minister came into office. We heard it in the election campaign, that this election is not about UWP versus the SLP. It's about Chastanet versus the SLP. We heard the saying from so many that Chastanet will not be Prime Minister over my dead body. Mr. Speaker, the attacks have been endless, non-ending. Mr. Speaker, I actually recall seeing a video being circulated by an association of the opposition where the Prime Minister apparently had a hiccup, and to the point where they requested that the Prime Minister produce a medical certificate to say if he was all right to run the country. Non-ending, Mr. Speaker. The question I need to ask, Mr. Speaker, is who did the Prime Minister upset? The opposition has gone about criticizing the Prime Minister and by extension St. Lucia to the point where the Prime Minister had to do significant traveling to try to save the face of our beloved island St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, there is a saying that lies can become truths if we allow it to. And therefore, we need to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that today we put an end to these lies. Because the motion, Mr. Speaker, is all about subjective, no facts. And I will bring the facts. I will bring the facts. Mr. Speaker, you know, I hear members opposite speak about a non-caring Prime Minister. One of the first things that touched me about this Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, was when he recognized a significant need for an increase in social workers in the country. Mr. Speaker, in my community, we have heard cases of children being abused, of children being taken advantage in all forms and fashions, and the schools only having one counselor, 11 schools in Choiseul, one counselor. A government that was in power for so many years never recognized the need to increase the people who can take care of our children, the vulnerable. This Prime Minister is taking care of that, and we will see that coming out later this year. They've spoken significantly of the Prime Minister saying one thing before elections, and when in office, saying another thing. Mr. Speaker, do you remember the words, VAT is an oppressive tax? You remember that?
Yeah, doesn't remember.
Who introduced it? Going back on your words. Let us look at some of the things that has been raised. Let us look at something that has been raised, Mr. Speaker. They've spoken about schools. Almost all of the members across have spoken about schools. The conditions of schools, Mr. Speaker. Conditions of schools. It is the worst it has ever been. You know why? You know why? What was in the budget, previous government of the SLP? What has been in the government to rehabilitate and renovate schools? Tell us the figure. I can tell you. $1 million. Do you know what we have pumped into rehabilitation of schools last year? $10 million. $10 million. I speak for Choiseul, and I will tell you, Choiseul has never seen such an extensive amount of rehabilitation done at schools in any period in time. And last year we saw it. And it will continue this year, Mr. Speaker. It will continue. And it will continue until we get our schools to a point where our teachers and students feel comfortable enough. All of our public buildings infested with molds, all kind of things. No maintenance in any of our buildings. You know, and our Prime Minister is spending money that has never been spent before on maintaining these buildings. And we want to say that our Prime Minister is an uncaring Prime Minister. We speak about roads, maintenance on roads. We speak about roads being done under the previous governments. What roads have been done under the previous government? Tell us. What roads have been done under the previous governments? Huh? Tell us the roads. You know? We have an extensive road rehabilitation program that has started and is continuing. And, Mr. Speaker, the people are no longer blind. The people can see what is being done on the ground. And as I speak, I'll confirm with you. I'm still not speaking as a politician, but as a parliamentary representative. Right. Mr. Speaker, the previous government responsible for unprecedented concessions to a hotel. Unprecedented. Where our farmers have been affected, fishermen can be affected. It's unprecedented, Mr. Speaker. Talk about a caring government. We speak about, Mr. Speaker, what has been done to curb crime. Mr. Speaker, under this government, there has never been more vehicles purchased for the government, not coming from the Consolidated Fund. We have heard time and time again of a forensic lab that was closed, Mr. Speaker. Which government paid attention to putting this forensic lab back in order? We have heard of an absence of a DPP. We have heard of the Marine unit being unoperable. We have seen new equipment being purchased for the police officers. And this year we're going to see significant equipment being brought to assist the police in battling crime. So, Mr. Speaker, when we hear about things that are trying to confuse people, but we know that our government is working under the leadership of the Prime Minister to take care of the deficiencies in the system. You know, Mr. Speaker, what upsets me and irks me is when the opposition continually speaks on matters that create chaos and confusion among our people, talking about we will not be able to bathe on our beaches. Ludicrous! Who will prevent any solution from bathing on our beaches? You know, this is the kind of things that, you know, they want to spread to the people who are ill-informed, you know, so that the people can get riled up. We know that cannot happen. Lucians are waking up to a new kind of society. I heard the member from Beaufort North. Lucians are waking up to a new kind of society where people, and he's right, you know, because you know what's happening now, Mr. Speaker? Our people are beginning to believe that I don't have to depend on a politician. That is the new reality. I don't have to depend on a handout from a government. Okay? From the time I've been a little boy, I've always been hearing, you know, they're playing the card of the Malawi. Always playing a Malawi card, you know. And if, you know, they're trying to entitle you, that you are entitled to be a Malawi. What are we doing to try to take our people out from the Malawi syndrome to elevate them? What are we doing? We need to make our people believe and know that their life can change. And I know all what the Prime Minister is doing, in particular for the south of the island, where there is significant unemployment and significant poverty, is to elevate the life and the standard of our people. Mr. Speaker, we have to start thinking differently. We cannot play the same old politics. We have to elevate the debate in this House. We have to start having our representatives speaking on a different level. There are now opportunities for St. Lucians to become their own bosses. There are now opportunities for us to become entrepreneurs, to be masters of our own fates, Mr. Speaker. And that is the destiny that St. Lucians are waking up to, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I won't take much time because we've heard a lot, and I know my colleagues have a lot to say. But I will end by saying I have every confidence in the Honorable Alan Chastanet as Prime Minister, and that this vote of no confidence is a sham. Thank you.
That's right.
Honorable member from Mako North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've had to sit in this honorable House today and witness what, to my mind, was new low after new low after new low. And I say this because whereas we understand that it is well within the purview of the members opposite to choose to do what they wish with respect to a motion of no confidence in our dear Prime Minister, we must never lose sight of the fact that this is the Honorable House, that we have a responsibility to conduct ourselves in a particular way, and especially knowing full well that our children, our young people are tuned in. And I therefore wish to raise and table my concern for what I have seen unfold here today. But that is not the reason that I have stood. I stand because I heard insinuations coming from members opposite as if to suggest that the Honorable Prime Minister is denying ministers and MPs the resources and the opportunity to fulfill their role as MP or as minister. And I'm compelled to stand and say that this is very far from the truth. I can say that because I have very vivid recollections of our position regarding the KNIFES program. And in several different ways and in several places we said, it is one thing to create short-term employment, but what are you doing to enhance the employability of the workers when their contracts would have come to an end? And that is why only days ago we graduated a cohort of students from the hospitality program hosted by Monroe College in the South so that we can enhance the employability of our young people. And not only have we done so for them in the local jurisdiction, but their certification has international comparability, which means that they can also be employed outside of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I have heard so many attempts from members opposite to hold this administration responsible for what they perceive to be the stop to the laptop program. I will say it again for those who perhaps have not heard it previously or perhaps failed to understand the government's posture with regard to e-education. That to equip students with the artifacts of technology, with laptops, without the accompanying and commensurate programming, does nothing more than to put a toy in their hands or a tool in their hands for which they cannot maximize the full utility of the machine. What has this Prime Minister done? He has seen to it that he has mobilized the resources, $9 million in total, to do what with? Not only to provide a particular form with laptops, but to ensure the conversion of many classrooms within schools into smart classrooms so that more children can benefit at the primary and secondary schools. That's why I'm compelled to stand. I'm compelled to stand here and pledge my support for him, because he also understands that to do so needs that policy has to be, or that activity has to be accompanied by a policy which yesterday, I'm proud to say, yesterday we passed in the cabinet of this government the ICT education policy in schools. You don't just drop laptops in their hands. And that goes beautifully with the other program which we started 2 years ago upon assuming office, and that is innovation in the curriculum to introduce ICT-related courses or courses to enhance the digital competency of our students, so when indeed they are greeted with a laptop or any other piece of machinery, they have the competency to leverage that machine for their advancement and not simply for recreational purposes. I support this Prime Minister because last summer, a team of persons from my ministry, we were invited to the World Bank upon the prompting of this Prime Minister to discuss not only education, but another issue that's very close to his heart and to our hearts, and that is gender relations, and to address issues of gender-based violence, ensuring we empower girls, that we address vulnerability in women, and my team from Solid Waste and Sustainable Development. And you know what? In 1 week, we were able to discuss with the World Bank the intimate needs of that ministry and to put together a program of activities. And you will hear more about this, but I stand here tonight, because tonight is what I have. I'm not sure about the budget debate yet. Tonight, to say that this Prime Minister has seen it fitting to give the blessing for our ministry to access $20 million so that we can implement the program we discussed with the World Bank last July. That's why I'm standing here. Mr. Speaker, my colleague has said in passing what we inherited with respect to school plans. Let me give you a simple example. The Viewford Comprehensive Secondary School, a school that does very, very well, the alma mater of some people in this very chamber. When I walked that compound, teachers and students alike said to me, "Minister, termites fall into our school bags, into our lunch boxes, and into our hair." By the time I got to Castries, and had engaged this Prime Minister, he said, go ahead and do what you need to do for the A-level block where the termites were falling in the hair of children, in the hair of teachers, in their lunch boxes, and in their school bags. And by the way, the termites preceded us, but it was this Prime Minister who gave us the resources to rehabilitate that block. Yes, in Beaufort South, incidentally. But let me say further, that was outside of the 10 million that he gave later on in the year to address similar issues in other schools around the country. You don't have to be a parent. You don't have to be a teacher or have a child in school to feel uncomfortable in the core of your being when you see the condition of the schools that we inherited. But this Prime Minister, Alan Michael Chastanet, made it a priority and pumped $10 million in one summer.
That's more than they spent in 5 years.
Mr. Speaker, I'm compelled to stand to say to all of St. Lucia that within weeks of assuming office, when I walked the Sir Arthur Lewis College compound, and I was taken to the building that once housed the hospitality department, my skin crawled. You talk about mold and mildew as if these are insignificant. You ask your friends in the medical fraternity what impact inhalation of those kinds of things can have on your health. So Sir Arthur Lewis had reason to shut it down. While they were there, I met it that way. The building did not deteriorate to that extent between the 6th of June and the following weeks when I visited. And when Principal Saunders said to me, Madam Minister, if we do not address the situation at Sir Arthur Lewis, we are at risk of not reopening in August, September of 2016. We did the responsible thing. We sought to relocate them, and I engaged this same Prime Minister and said, let's put a plan together for Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. I'll tell you what the plan entails. You'll hear more of it during the budget debate. Already, in the rollout of the plan, we've been able to rehabilitate at least 2 buildings, thanks to this Prime Minister. Extra budgetary, outside of the 10 million, outside of the 700 or 800 he gave me for Beaufort, and outside of the 15 million he already gives to Sir Arthur, he found 1.5 for us to rehabilitate buildings at Sir Arthur in time for the reopening of schools. That's why I'm standing here to support him. And it goes on, and I can tell you more, and I beg the indulgence of everyone, because we cannot sit here and allow members opposite to give the impression that this Prime Minister does not care about the people of this country. Here is the evidence. And I'm only speaking about my ministry. Everybody else will speak about his or hers in turn. Sir Arthur Lewis again. When we inherited the EQUIP project and we felt it necessary to reprioritize, Prime Minister says, I want to see a plan that places Sir Arthur Lewis front and center in any restructuring of the education sector. We are in the process. We have engaged CDB, and we are in the process of putting together what casually we already call a program for educational reform, review, and transformation, the PUT program. You will hear more about that at budget time. That is an additional win opportunity worth at least $15 million for the education sector. That's, you know, when you invest in someone's education, what you do for them? You give that person an opportunity. You give their immediate family an opportunity. You give their extended family an opportunity. And you give the generations to come an opportunity. That is why we believe in investing in education, led by this Honorable Prime Minister. We talk about village tourism. And I want to applaud this initiative, because what it does is not only to showcase the heritage gems, the local gems in the respective communities that are part of that program, but it helps to stimulate the local economy therein and help to create a greater multiplier effect of the money generated, earned therein, as happens with Dennery, with Grosley, in Soufrière, and Emmak to happen in Micoud North, for example. So when you hear people talking about that there seems to be a focus on some other grandiose foreign entities, they forget the conversation, very conveniently, they forget the conversation on village tourism. Mr. Speaker, it was that statement that provoked me, that insinuation, as if to suggest that somehow we are not being allowed the latitude or the opportunity to take care of our flock and our ministries. Although this has been debated, but because it was raised today, I want to applaud the effort of the Prime Minister in mobilizing the resources, not only to rehabilitate and rebuild playing facilities in this country, but to see it fitting to put together an accompanying educational program within the entity of the Center of Excellence for Sports, so that you can create additional pathways for young sportsmen and women to become professional sports personalities on the international stage, so that a Darren Sammy won't be an aberration, a Laverne Spencer won't be a once in a lifetime, a Miss Alfred won't be somebody we hear about every 10 years, that we are creating pathways. So you have the physical infrastructure in sports, but the commensurate programming in schools, so you create diversity in the curriculum so that they have more choice. That is why I support what this Prime Minister is doing with respect to sports. And I must say, I'm obliged to say too, that the sportsmen and women in Micoud North are looking forward to a new facility thanks to this Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, that is why I reject any suggestion that this Prime Minister is trampling on our heritage. Our heritage, that's a very, very large umbrella term. It is who we are, what we do, how we do it, our unique talent, our authenticity, what we have in our landscape, and leveraging all of that. So whether it be through sports, he does it. Whether it's through village tourism, he does it. Whether it is through enhancing the allocation for Creole Heritage Month, he does it. So I take violent objection to any notion that this Prime Minister is trampling on our heritage. I know the others want to speak, Mr. Speaker, but I tell you, I could go on all night, because there is something unjust about much of what happened today. The intellectual dishonesty that was displayed here today was vomitous. And I'm saying to the people of St. Lucia, you can read, you can write, you understand English, open your ears and your eyes, and open your eyes in particular, that you can see for yourselves the work that we have started to do, and you will see in time more of what is to come. And that is why I stand here and I say that this Prime Minister is leading this flock of builders because we have hope, because we see new opportunity, and we know that we can continue to set St. Lucia on a prosperous path that will benefit all of St. Lucians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member for Castro Central.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to make my contribution. I suspect I will be brief. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say that the motion brought before this Honorable House by the Leader of the Opposition was very unfortunate. It was unfortunate, too, that it was allowed to be brought in the form that it was brought, which I think has brought this House into disrepute. It has lowered the standards of this House.
Honorable Member,
because it
Honorable
has set
Member,
a
Honorable
precedent.
Member, I'll ask you to refrain here. I'll ask you to stop here because I have taken a position on that. Let's move beyond that, okay? Because now you're taking issue with my ruling, and I will not want to reopen this debate. So let's just jump this hurdle and move on. Thank you very much.
Happily, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot more to be said. Mr. Speaker, the fact that the Leader of the Opposition brought this motion here shows a complete lack of respect for the democratic process. That is what it is. A complete lack of respect for the democratic process. The people of St. Lucia in June 2016 voted this government in and voted this Prime Minister to lead the country. It is just 2.5 years and they refuse. They refuse to accept the will of the people. That is what it is about. Because they have been in election mode from June 2016. Refuse to accept that this is the people's Prime Minister that the people have elected. That is what it is all about. Lack of respect for the democratic process. And that is why they will never be able to understand our principled position on the Venezuela issue. They just do not think principle. They don't understand what it means to respect the democratic process. All they are about is political expediency, not principle. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that they passed a budget here in this Honorable House just days before the election was called. They tied the hands of the incoming government. That's what they did. They saddled us with their budget, which they did not even take time to debate. They passed an appropriation bill and saddled the incoming government. That's what we had to work with in the first year. And yet we laid the foundation for the kinds of projects and work you are seeing being executed. 1 whole year saddled with their budget without even a policy statement from them as to what this budget was supposed to be about. 1 whole year gone, yet we worked. And you are telling me today, Mr. Speaker, that they can have the audacity to come in here, allow the government to do its work. Let the fruits of our labor be seen. It's only 2.5 years. Accept that the people have voted you out of office. Accept that the people have placed their confidence in this Prime Minister. Allow the term of office to run. You will have an opportunity. Elections will come at the end of the term of office. The people will decide again. What is the hurry? What is the hurry? It's time for them to accept that they lost the election, and that is what it is. They just cannot accept the will of the people. Mr. Speaker, the motion presented speaks about the Honorable Prime Minister. The Honorable Prime Minister causing the further deterioration of the provision of healthcare services. government represented by the members on the opposite side never really meant to deal with the problem of healthcare in St. Lucia. It was about patching things up. If they were really serious, we would have had national health insurance here today already. You know what they were telling me? You know what they were telling me when I was working so hard to deal with the Golden Hope issue? You know what they said? They said the people there do not vote. Why are you worried about Golden Hope? The people there do not vote. The people there do not vote. That's what they were telling me. And listen to what they're saying about St. Jude. Listen to what they're saying. They're saying, although the reports have said that the building, it's a building, but it cannot properly accommodate a hospital. Because a hospital is not just the walls. Everything has to be technically done so that it can perform the functions. They're saying to just do this and just throw chemical there and just put the people in there. That is what they're saying. But we are saying no. We will make sure it is a first-class hospital fit for purpose. And what is the point of just putting people in there? There's CT scan, there's everything, but people don't have the money to pay. This Prime Minister has pledged his commitment to seeing that we have national health insurance. So we will not just have the building, have the equipment. The people will be able to access the services. This is what this is about. The former Prime Minister has been in office, was in office for how many? For 2 terms. Or is it 3? 3 terms. He never got it done. He was the Minister of Finance and the member for Beaufort South and left St. Jude in that state. And you cannot give this Prime Minister his term of office to get the job done. 2.5 years, halfway in the term, you're already so hungry for blood. You bring in this motion here? This is an insult to the people of St. Lucia, who have already placed their confidence in this Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I am in a position to see. I have served on this side of the House. I have served on that side of the House. I have served on this, in this place in the House. I've served as a public servant. I've served as a diplomat. I've served under a number of prime ministers. And I have to see, and I believe I'm in a position to say, that this is the Prime Minister I've seen who best and most empowers his ministers. I have never been, I contested, I accepted the will of the people.
That's right.
The democratic process unfolded. I accepted the will of the people, threw my weight behind the political leader, and I made the best decision. This is how you respect the will of the people. This is how you respect it.
Honorable members, allow the honorable member for Castro Sen.
Yes, I will stay focused, Mr. Speaker. I won't allow myself to be distracted. Mr. Speaker, I have never seen a Prime Minister who empowers his ministers, allows ideas and creativity to flow, nurtures. I mean, we have seen Prime Ministers who have left office and there is no second in command to take on the role. This is why they're in the position that they are in now. They don't even have a leader. They don't have a leader who is credible because guess what? Their political leader and Prime Minister didn't nurture anybody. We are operating within a cabinet where the Prime Minister encourages and empowers his ministers and encourages creativity. Mr. Speaker, in closing, Mr. Speaker, in closing, I have to say what an honor it is to serve in the cabinet led by the Honorable Prime Minister. I have said in this Honorable House that how sad it was to witness the former Prime Minister stop prayers in cabinet. I have said how sad it was to witness that. But I want to say in this Honorable House how moving and beautiful it was 2 weeks ago to see this Prime Minister lead prayers in cabinet. And I want to tell yes, behind closed doors. And I want to tell the people of St. Lucia, and I want on behalf of the people of Castries Central, who I represent, to fully throw my support behind the Honorable Prime Minister, to encourage him to continue to do the work that he's doing, to continue to steer the ship and not be distracted. Do not worry about the detractors. Your eyes lifted toward heaven, and you keep your hand on the steering wheel. Mr. Speaker, this motion came here because they are scared of all the good work that they are doing. They saw the Prime Minister's delivery at the New Year's address. They saw the promise. They looked down the road and they saw if they allow this Prime Minister to continue, there is no hope for them again at the next election. But they will have to allow him to continue his term of office. They will have to respect the will of the people. They will have to understand what democracy really means. And when the time comes, the people of St. Lucia will decide. In the meantime, they have enough time to find a leader who's brave enough to challenge our Honorable Prime Minister. So, Mr. Speaker, with this said, I reject completely and utterly this vote, this motion of no confidence, and I place my support on behalf of the people of Castries Central behind the Honorable Prime Minister. I thank you.
Sorry? Yes. Yeah.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to beg to suspend the House for half an hour in order for us to have dinner. Half an hour.
Honorable members, the question is that the House be suspended for the next half hour. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. House is suspended.